The message came in just after I finished reviewing a report on hydraulic system malfunctions in older Airbus models. I was in the crew lounge at Hartsfield-Jackson, sipping bad coffee, my legs stretched across a stiff leather chair. Layovers were always quiet, and this one was no different until my phone buzzed. Just a heads up. Filing for divorce next week. That was it. From Elise. No, hi. No explanation. Just a cold announcement dropped like a brick on my screen. For a second, my thumb hovered over the glass. I read it again to make sure I wasn't misinterpreting it. Nope. That was the whole thing. I looked around. The lounge was half empty, a flight attendant snoring lightly in the corner, some junior co-pilot watching highlights on his tablet. I didn't feel shock. Not really. What I felt was confirmation. It was like watching the inevitable unfold right on schedule. A quiet nod from fate, saying, "Told you." We hadn't been a real couple in over a year. Elise had taken 3 sabbaticals in 12 months to reconnect with herself. Each time she came back more distant, her phone more guarded, her patience shorter. I wasn't dumb. I noticed the way her tone changed when she said the word Marcus, like I was just some technician she had to deal with. I'd seen her get up and walk out of rooms when I asked simple questions. The we in our marriage had become I for her and nothing for me. But she didn't know I'd already seen it coming. Weeks ago, I hired a lawyer. Carla Renshaw, sharp, no nonsense, and 10 times more prepared than Elise would ever be. We'd already gone through the asset documentation, the prenup Elise herself once insisted on, and the full outline of my investments, all carved out carefully from the marital pool. She hadn't noticed, but I'd quietly shifted my consultancy revenue under a new LLC. Transferred stock options from the joint trust back into my name. The moment Elise started reading The Untethered Soul and booking yoga retreats to Sedona, I knew what was coming. I didn't reply to the text right away. I just took a slow breath, reached for my tablet again, and finished the last 2 pages of the safety report. I had a flight to think about tomorrow. Atlanta to Denver. By the time I got up to refill my coffee, my pulse had returned to normal. She thought she was dropping a bomb. She didn't know I'd already moved the target. Let her file. I'd been ready for weeks. I didn't wait. The second I stepped out of the lounge and into the airport's quiet hallway, I pulled out my phone and dialed Carla. She answered on the second ring. Marcus, you finally get the text? Just now. She said she's filing next week. Cute, Carla said. We're filing tomorrow. That's why I hired her. No frills, no sugar. Just action. By the time I got to my hotel room, Carla had already emailed over the final petition. We'd reviewed it 3 times over the last month, the asset protections, the prenup clauses, the schedule of individually owned property. She wasn't just ready. She'd been waiting with the engine running. Want me to file it in the morning or this evening? She asked. Tonight, I said. Let her wake up to it. She didn't comment. She just said, you'll get the timestamped confirmation within the hour. I dropped onto the bed, shoes still on, the city lights of Atlanta glowing through the blinds. I stared at the ceiling for a long moment. Then I opened my phone and typed out a message to Elise. Already filed. The prenup remains in full effect, as you agreed and signed with your own attorney. My lawyer will be in touch. Good luck. I paused. No insults. No guilt tripping. Just facts. I hit send. The read receipt popped up about 20 seconds later. But no reply came. Back when things were good, or at least less broken, Elise liked to talk about how she was a planner. She once bragged about how she made our financial life bulletproof by demanding a prenup. I'd agreed without hesitation. At the time, her trust fund was still active, and she liked having the moral high ground. She made a show of having her own lawyer draft half of it. Now, that document was the only wall between me and her plan B. I opened my laptop and pulled up the latest portfolio statement I'd already forwarded to Carla. My aviation consultancy had grown steadily, not massive, but profitable and protected. The accounts were clean, separated, and categorized as my own under the prenup Schedule B. Every dollar from my commercial pilot work, every retained client from my side business, every reinvested dividend documented. The key was precision. No commingling. No shared access. No gray areas. Carla had looked it all over twice. She can throw a tantrum, she said, but she can't touch any of this. I closed my laptop. Still no reply from Elise. That silence told me everything. She hadn't seen it coming. She thought I'd stall. That I'd wait, drag my feet, maybe beg for reconciliation. She thought she had the upper hand. But she misread me. She'd been planning her escape while I'd been engineering my exit. And now? The first move was mine. The email came 2 days later, dropped into Carla's inbox with the subject line, Urgent. Response to divorce filing. Representation by Leonard Chatham, ESQ. I was on layover in Dallas when I got her text. Read this when you've got time. It's laughable. I skimmed the attached PDF while waiting for ground transport. 10 pages of pomp and legal fluff from Elise's newly retained attorney, Leonard Chatham, a man with a reputation for being loud, theatrical, and expensive. His opening paragraph read more like a tabloid rant than a legal document. My client has reason to believe that Mr. Marcus Denton has deliberately concealed assets, commingled marital funds with private consultancy profits, and used his financial control to manipulate the marital dynamic. I read that line twice. Then again, Carla wasn't wrong. It was laughable. We are seeking full and transparent disclosure of all financial holdings, including but not limited to private aviation contracts, investment accounts, and any business income generated during the course of the marriage. My client further intends to pursue a claim for spousal support and partial ownership of Mr. Denton's consultancy enterprise. Partial ownership of a business Elise had never touched, never asked about, never contributed to. She once joked about how airplane people were all the same, then called my job a weird mix of Top Gun and spreadsheets. I called Carla as soon as I got to the hotel. He actually used the phrase, manipulated the marital dynamic, I said, tossing my suitcase on the bed. I know, she said dryly. Sounds like he found a thesaurus and a bottle of wine. Any of this a real threat? She snorted. No, he's fishing. Probably hasn't even seen the prenup yet. He will, I said. I'm forwarding the version she signed. Scanned, dated, and notarized. Her own attorney's name is right there. Carla had already anticipated it. I'm compiling a package response. Prenup. Schedules A and B. Proof of independent counsel. Proof Elise was not under duress. Her trust income statements from before marriage. Your business registration and client contracts, all predating the marriage. She doesn't have a leg to stand on, Marcus. Still, part of me wanted to punch something. Not because I was scared, because I was insulted. She knew the business wasn't ours. She knew what she waved. Elise once held up that prenup like a trophy, proud of how sophisticated couples handled things. Now she was acting like it never happened. Or maybe Leonard was just giving her false hope, whispering about loopholes and leverage. Carla sighed on the other end. This is what happens when pride meets panic. She thought she'd control the timeline. Instead, you beat her to the punch. I nodded to myself, jaw tight. She picked the wrong battlefield, I said. This one's mapped, measured, and mine. Carla chuckled. Let them come. I'll hand them their hat at the door. I leaned back, staring at the hotel ceiling. Elise wanted a war. Fine. But I wasn't the one walking in blind. This wasn't revenge. This was defense. Strategic, cold, and fully documented. It was a Wednesday afternoon when she showed up. I was in the middle of a virtual consult with a safety compliance officer out of Seattle. The guy was walking me through a series of revised FAA guidelines when I heard the front door open downstairs. My office is on the second floor of the house, tucked away, quiet, private. Nobody uses the front door unless they live here. Footsteps. Then her voice, sharp and too casual. Marcus. I muted the call, my jaw already tightening. I knew that voice. Knew the rhythm of those heels on my hardwood floor. Elise. She walked straight into my office like she still lived there, like she hadn't hit me with a divorce text less than a week ago. Same tight black jeans, same oversized sunglasses perched on her head like some lifestyle influencer who just got off a flight. She didn't even knock. What the hell are you doing here? I asked, standing up slowly. I came to talk, she said, hands on her hips like she had a right to be offended. You filed behind my back. I didn't even answer that. You used your old key to let yourself in. That's illegal now, Elise. Oh, please. She waved her hand like we were squabbling over furniture. This is still my home, too. No, it's not, I said. You moved out 6 months ago. You have no claim, and the filing confirms that. I suggest you leave. She scoffed but didn't budge. Her eyes flicked around the room, as if taking inventory. So this is where all the magic happens, huh? Your little pilot empire? I didn't respond. She was baiting me, and I wasn't biting. She shifted her stance, arms now folded. You blindsided me, Marcus. After everything I gave up for this marriage. Like what? I asked. The week-long meditation retreat in Sedona? The writing sabbatical you took in Tulum? You were building an escape plan, Elise. You just didn't think I'd beat you to it. I gave you the best years of my life, she snapped. You gave me receipts, I said calmly, walking over to the filing cabinet and pulling out a folder. I handed her a copy of the vacation expenditures, all charged to her personal account. Separate funds, just like the prenup required. She flipped through them in silence. That retreat? That spa in Santa Barbara? You paid for all of it with your own card. Solo bookings. Not a dime from the marital pool. She looked up. So you've been tracking me. I've been protecting myself. She moved toward my desk, voice rising. So that's it. You're just going to leave me with nothing? I want spousal support. I laughed once, dry and sharp. You waived that. Page 3 of the prenup. You called it empowering. Said you didn't want to be some 1950s wife. Her face twisted, but she had no comeback. You came here thinking you'd guilt me, I added. That you could throw a tantrum in my office and change the outcome. She turned, arms crossed, seething. You don't live here anymore, I said firmly. I'll be changing the locks by morning. Next time, you knock. If you're invited. And then, finally, she left, heels clicking down the stairs like gunfire. Elise thought she still had keys to the door. She didn't realize I'd already changed everything else. The call came from my bank's fraud department. Mr. Denton, we need to confirm some unusual activity on your joint account ending in 9273. I already knew what this was. She tried to empty it? I asked flatly. The rep hesitated. There was an attempted withdrawal of $12,000 this morning at the Westfield branch. The account was already flagged as frozen per your previous instructions, so the transaction was denied. I sighed. And the person who tried to pull it, was it Elise Denton? Yes, sir. She became extremely agitated when we declined the transaction. There was a public disturbance. Of course there was. By the time I got the footage forwarded to Carla, Elise had already escalated. She'd screamed at the branch manager, called the staff corporate thieves, and even threatened legal action. The clip ended with her being escorted out by security, still shouting about how her own husband was trying to bankrupt her. I forwarded it to Carla. 5 minutes later, she called, laughing under her breath. Well, she certainly made an impression. That account's been dormant for 6 months, I said. I left a small balance there out of convenience, but all my funds have been isolated since last year. She knew that. She thought she could make a scene and gain sympathy, Carla said. But you know what's funny? Leonard just sent me a new brief. I leaned back in my chair. Let me guess. Commingled funds. Ding ding. He's arguing that your aviation consultancy pulled money from the marital account and therefore is partly community property. He claims your marital investments helped build the business. That's insane, I said. There was no shared capital. Not $1. I know. And we have receipts to prove it. She was already emailing me a draft response, pages of financial breakdowns. My personal investments were all made prior to the marriage, and none had ever involved Elise. Schedule A and B of the prenup outlined every asset. In fact, it was Elise's own attorney who had insisted the language be that specific back when she thought her trust fund would be the bigger pie. You want to know the kicker? Carla added. Leonard's brief misspells your LLC's name 3 different ways. They're scrambling. Good. I stared out the window, watching a neighbor's golden retriever chase its own tail. The irony wasn't lost on me. Elise had always lived like she had a net. Her family money, her looks, her charm, they all worked until they didn't. And now, with no leverage and a frozen joint account, she was falling hard and fast. She's burning fuel with no runway, I muttered. Carla chuckled. Let her. Everything they've thrown at us. We've blocked it before they even cleared the gate. Later that night, I checked the security app linked to the house. Elise had tried the front door around midnight. The lock blinked red. Denied. No message. No call. Just silence. I watched the playback once, then deleted it. This wasn't a game anymore. It was a slow-motion collapse, hers, not mine. And I had no plans to break her fall. It was a Thursday morning when Carla called me, her tone unusually chipper. You're going to love this, she said. What now? Leonard finally read the prenup. Like, really read it. I chuckled. Let me guess, he just realized he's been shadowboxing for 3 weeks. Bingo. He called me this morning, practically choking on his own pride. Wanted to discuss a more amicable path forward. His words. I leaned back in my kitchen chair, stirring my espresso with a slow grin. Meaning? meaning he wants to avoid any further embarrassment. He's pitching the idea of a gesture of goodwill from your end. Something modest to help Elise with transitional support. I laughed out loud. He's folding. Oh, he's crumbling, Carla said. Tried to play it off like this was a strategic pivot, but you could hear it in his voice. He knows the prenup is ironclad. No ambiguity. No wiggle room. Everything they've tried to challenge is spelled out with signatures. What did you tell him? That goodwill is not a legal strategy, she said, cool as ice. And that if Elise needs transitional support, maybe she should transition to a job. Ouch. Carla didn't even pause. I also reminded him that Elise explicitly waived spousal support, not once, but twice. Once in the prenup and once again in the postnup rider she signed when she took the year off to find herself. That was during her Croatia phase, right? I said. Yep. When she posted about sunsets and letting the universe guide her. That universe is apparently broke now. I sipped my espresso, savoring the quiet. The storm had broken. Leonard's call was the first real crack in the siege. Elise has no leverage left, Carla continued. The trust fund's locked by her parents, she's got no claim to your business, and she can't even pull a pity stunt at the bank anymore. She's losing altitude fast. I stood and walked to the window. The yard was still, the sky clean. For the first time in months, my world felt weightless. What do you want to do? Carla asked. Nothing, I said. Let the papers stand. No offers. No gestures. She made this bed. She can cry in it. You sure? Dead sure. She paused, then said, You know, I've seen guys like you cave at this point. Sentimental last-minute moves. Guilt. Nostalgia. You're one of the few who never blinked. Because I saw this coming. Elise always thought she had an ace up her sleeve. She forgot I built the deck. Carla exhaled slowly. Then we're done here. Final orders submitted by tomorrow. I hung up and sat in the quiet. The war was ending. Not with a bang, but with a phone call that sounded a lot like surrender. The final text came on a Sunday morning. I was finishing a jog through the neighborhood, my breath steady, the air thick with spring humidity. My phone buzzed as I stepped onto my porch. It was from Elise. You really think you've won? You'll be alone forever. I hope your stupid business keeps you warm at night. No punctuation. No filter. Just desperation, typed fast and bitter. That same afternoon, Carla confirmed it. Elise and Leonard had signed the final divorce terms. Word for word, line for line, exactly as outlined in the prenup. No edits. No negotiations. Elise had nothing left to fight with. Leonard looked like he aged 5 years since I first spoke to him, Carla said on the phone. You were right not to flinch. They were banking on you cracking. And you didn't. I had nothing to crack for, I said. She already emptied out anything that mattered years ago. By the end of the week, the court had stamped the decree. We were legally divorced. Clean. Untangled. Finished. The first thing I did was change the locks, not because I thought Elise would show up again, but because it felt symbolic. A final sweep of the debris. I walked through the house that night, room by room, noticing how much space I had now. Her framed photos were gone. The trendy furniture she insisted on was donated weeks ago. Her scent no longer clung to the fabric of the couch. The silence felt good. Not lonely. Just quiet. News traveled quickly. Elise had been forced to move out of her luxury apartment downtown after missing rent for 2 months. Her parents, not pleased with the public fallout, froze what remained of her trust until she could demonstrate fiscal stability. That was their polite way of saying, You've embarrassed us. Last I heard, she was crashing in the guest room of her sister's house in Richmond, a woman she hadn't spoken to in over 5 years. Reconciliation by necessity. She never called. Never emailed. Just that last pitiful text, the one that tried to cut, but missed entirely. I didn't reply. What was there to say? Elise thought she'd orchestrated a clean break with all the leverage in her corner. She thought her lawyer would scare me, that the public drama would pressure me, that I'd beg to keep her. But she misjudged the kind of man I am. A pilot knows how to prepare for turbulence. He doesn't panic at the first sign of resistance. He studies the charts, plans the route, knows his emergency protocols cold. And when the engine flames out mid-flight, he doesn't scream. He lands the damn plane. That's what this was. Not revenge. Not cruelty. Just a controlled descent. And now? Now the runway was clear. 1 month later, I was back in the air. Not literally. I was on a break from flying commercial, but my private aviation consultancy was busier than ever. 2 new clients signed contracts in the same week. One of them, a former Navy officer turned CEO, shook my hand and said, You run a tight operation. I like that. I'd forgotten what it felt like to hear respect in someone's voice without strings attached. I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. The house was finally mine in every sense. The walls felt lighter. No more tense silences, no more passive-aggressive clutter Elise used to leave around, half-unpacked candles, half-read books on soul alignment, expensive yoga mats that never got used. Gone. I rearranged the living room to my liking, set up a new sound system, even installed a proper espresso machine. Nothing too flashy, but everything mine. Clean lines, quiet nights, and the hum of music I didn't have to turn down or explain. For the first time in years, I started sleeping through the night. The friends who had disappeared during the awkward middle months of my marriage started to trickle back into my life. Not all at once. Just a lunch here, a drink there. A couple of old buddies from flight school reached out. One of them, Jake, said, "You sound like yourself again." I didn't realize I'd stopped sounding like me. On a quiet Friday night, I sat on the back porch with a bourbon in one hand and my phone in the other, rereading some of the early messages from Elise. I wasn't sure why I kept them. Maybe as a reminder. Maybe to test myself. I expected to feel something, regret, maybe, or a twinge of guilt. But there was nothing. Just calm. I'd spent so long trying to hold up a marriage that was already crumbling. I played the part of the reliable husband, the stable earner, the one who could fix things. But you can't fix someone who doesn't want to stay in the same life with you. Elise gambled on a version of herself that didn't include me and thought she'd cash out big on the way out. But the prenup she once brandished like a badge of independence ended up being my shield. Irony has a funny sense of timing. I looked out at the dark yard, peaceful and still. Did I feel sorry for her? Maybe for 5 minutes, back when the bank called me about her tantrum. Maybe when Carla told me about the frozen trust fund. But now? No, not really. She wasn't a victim. She made choices. So did I. Now I make my own espresso. I fly when I want. I build my business with people who value integrity over drama. I sleep with the windows open and no tension in my chest. I didn't win a war. I just walked away from one. And I never looked back.